Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. Before we get to today's guest, I want to chat a bit about today's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by romantic suspense novel Don't Look by Alexandra Ivy. Here's a bit of the book. New York Times bestseller author Alexandra Ivy proves her power to terrify and titillate in a thrilling novel of pure romantic suspense. As a serial murderer with a kill list stalks women in a small town in Wisconsin, his victims' bodies are left naked in the snow with nothing but a red scarf and their necks, a sinister calling card. If you're on his list, you're good as that. A woman's naked body is discovered, cold and pale in the surrounding snow, except for the crimson scarf around her neck. The weeks that follow brings more victims and evidence of a terrifying pattern. The killer has a list, and every woman on it will get what she deserves. Dr. Lynn Gale followed her father's footsteps to become a vet in Pike, Wisconsin. For years, she had little contact with Kurt Jansen, son of the town's lay sheriff. Suddenly, he's back, insisting that Lynn's in danger. She can't believe anyone would target her, but someone's hunting a woman of Pike, savoring every last moment. Kira hoped that his father's frantic calls about a serial killer were just an old man's illusions, but the body count doesn't lie. In this quiet town, the monster stalks and kills, and soon Lynn's will be the last name on his list. Demonstrated her strong plotting ability, Alexandra Ivy delivers a tale full of chilling suspense and unforgettable twists. Her blend of electrifying thrills and complex characters and top pegs in is certain to captivate readers of romantic suspense and crossover female thriller readers. This book sounds so good. As a reader of thrillers, I love the romantic suspense brings us to action while including the romance. So I love that it has a little bit of both elements with twisty turns and serial killers, and then there's like some romance that happens with them. So I really look forward to reading this book. You can purchase this book at your favorite bookseller. For more book recommendations, please visit kensingtonbooks.com. Today's guest is Reese Ryan. In this interview, we chat about her writing process, what it's like to write Harlequin romance, as well as her latest forever title, and some fun book recommendations. Now let's go to the show. Hi, Reese. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to chat with you. I was telling you before we started that I've been a huge fan of your work thanks to your Harlem Desire line. So I'm so excited that you're now publishing for Forever, which is exciting. So congratulations on like multiple books for a new generation's reader.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really, really do.
I love this. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I write sexy, emotional, romantic fiction featuring lots of family drama, surprising secrets, and a cast of complicated and sometimes messy characters. I have written for various imprints of Harlequin since 2013, and I am just this month launching a brand new series with Grand Central Forever, which is my first publication with them. So I'm super excited about this new Holly Grove Island series.
And we're going to chat about the Holly Grove Island series, but I may also ask you about the Bourbon Brothers series.
Absolutely, sure.
So what inspired you to become a writer?
So I love stories and stuff as a kid. I read heavily as a child. Probably, I don't know, maybe around 12 or 13, I read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And for me, it was like a real turning point because it made me want to write stories that took readers on a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster like that, you know, where you loved and hated the characters and you cheered for them and you wanted to choke them, you know, and you laughed and you cried. So I wanted to create stories like that. So that's really the moment I can really look back to and point to and to say that that's when I wanted to become a storyteller and not just a reader of stories.
I love this. Yeah, there's like a shift that happens. You just have to just acknowledge it and just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that was like the seed of inspiration that just drove you to really create a brand that features that. So
yeah, and it really impacted my writing for the rest of my, for the rest of my career, really, because like I didn't notice it until I was a few books in, but then that's when I kind of started to realize that like family drama and stuff was part of my brand, or it consistently was what I wrote about. And I realized it traced back to that book, Pride and Prejudice, and Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, another book that I really loved at that time. And so like those big families and all the drama in the family, the unconventional heroine is something that, you know, I had kind of picked up in my writing, and I didn't even realize that until like years later. So yeah, it had a huge impact on me, and it still does.
I love this. So what was your journey to get the first book published?
What was my journey like to get the first book published?
Yeah.
So let's see. I answered, I did the usual querying of agents like most people do, and no bites. And then later on, there was a website that was having, that would periodically have publishers from different smaller imprints come, and, you know, you could do like a pitch fest basically. And so I pitched a story to on that site. A publisher picked it up and said they would absolutely love to publish it. But in the meantime, I had already sent that story to Carina Press, but they hadn't responded yet. And so something just told me, you know, let me just call or contact Carina Press and say, hey, you know, because I was still waiting for a response from them, yay or nay, to let them know that, hey, this publisher wants this story. Are you guys interested? And then I got a yes from them. And so I actually went with Carina Press, and I'm super glad that I did, because that other publication, I don't even know that they made it a full year before they folded. So that was definitely a fortuitous choice.
So I got a question, because you published for Harlequin, and I feel like Harlequin books are category romance are a little different from the regular romance that we see. Like, I don't know, it's just like they're a different experience. Like, how is that process like to write a category romance? Is it different from writing, you know, a full length like novel like for forever?
Yes. So first of all, Harlequin, the Desire line that I write for currently, you know, they're around 50K. So whereas writing this book for Grand Central Forever, your bottom is more like 70. And, you know, it can go much higher. And so it is a very different process in terms of, you know, one of the things I've learned and love about writing category is that it makes you write tighter. All your words need to, you know, everything needs to be tight and concise, and you need to keep it moving. And so I love that. And that's the thing now, the challenge that now that I'm writing longer, I realize that I would like to keep that. So I need to find a way to, you know, work in this new environment where I keep that, you know, tightness and conciseness and that pace and stuff in this longer book. So that's definitely still a work in progress for me, but it's definitely a different progress, a different process. And then there's another book that's also for Desire that I wrote. And again, the max is supposed to be 50K. Why did I write this book to almost 90K? So then I had to spend 2 weeks trying to chop it down to like at least 60 so we can so you know, so it is a very, very different process in terms of, you know, the length and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I'm fascinated. You know, because whenever I'm in the mood for something short and sweet, I pick a category romance, you know, because they're it's tighter, it's just like faster paced, or just like you read them like in a sitting, you can do that, you know.
Right.
And then, you know, if you want to dive into the story of like the more stuff, you know, you go into, you know, another published author, you know, like regular, like not regular, but like a different romance, you know. So I was always curious to see, like, what is the process like from the author?
Yeah, it is definitely a difference. And so like I find myself as I go back and forth between the lines, now writing longer and then writing shorter, having to like get my mind right, you know, to go with that particular length. So yeah, it is a challenge, but I definitely, like I said, I do like a lot the fact that writing the shorter category has taught me that. And so I'm definitely going to try to move that into, my longer titles as well.
Yeah. And so this actually was a good segue. So do you follow an outline? Do you follow an outline, or do you see where the story leads? So you're a plotter or a pantser? What's your process like?
So the answer is both.
Mhm.
Because when I first started writing seriously again in hopes of getting published, I consider myself a hardcore pantser. I'm like, oh, I don't need an outline, I can whatever. So I kept writing these stories, and I would write myself into a corner. And so I kept writing stories, but I wasn't finishing them. And so I actually heard a podcast with author Kimberla Lawson Roby.
Mhm.
And she was talking about her outlining process, which she's like really, really, really an outliner, like a straight up outliner.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, yeah, I don't even aspire to outline that much. However, I'm like, what I'm doing is not working, because I'm not finishing anything. So I decided to try outlining at least to finish the scene I was stuck in. And I finished it. And then I did just like a couple sentences outline, of what was going to happen in the rest of the chapter. And I finished it. And so I finished that book. That was the first book that I finally finished. And so it really taught me that I do need some structure. But at
Mhm.
the same time, I also need the freedom to let my imagination run wild and to let the characters do whatever it is that they do. So the surprises and stuff that are built into the stories are not always planned from the beginning. Sometimes the character takes me someplace I did not expect. And so I need room to be able to do that as well.
I like this. Yeah, I feel like, sometimes you want to put the character in one boundary, and then you realize the character doesn't want to do it. And you're like,
Yeah.
the character's like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. That's right.
So,
Exactly. And my characters are very rebellious. So
yes, they are. Oh my gosh. So how do you develop your characters? Does it come to you? Do you brainstorm? What's the process like to get the characters right?
So for the characters, okay, so I usually start from a position of a story of like a situation, for instance, the Bourbon Brothers is a good example. The situation that prompted that series is hearing a story about Nearest Green, a formerly enslaved man who taught Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. And then also seeing a series called The Men Who Made America, about people like Ford and Tesla and, people like that. And it was just fascinating. It was all this drama and stuff. And so I kind of combined those two thoughts in thinking, okay, what if Nearest Green had been able to create his own empire of whiskey making as opposed to enriching someone else? And so that's what made me come up with a series of a Black family who had their own whiskey making empire. And so then I had to start thinking about who would the characters be who would be in the situation. And so once I start to kind of build that out, I use a trick that I learned from author Cherry Adair many, many years ago about giving an astrological sign to my characters. So I'll either use an astrological sign or I'll use something like 16 personalities. But I give them that. And then especially with the astrological signs, they have like really, really detailed information for each sign. Like, okay, here's a personality. Here's like what they're like in a love match. Here's like what they're like in friendships. This is how they handle money. This is the kind of lifestyle they lead or whatever. And it'll even tell you, okay, who's their best match and who's their worst match. And I actually use those things to really help me fill out the characters and make them feel like a fuller 3D person with both strengths and weaknesses, because that's important to me to have flawed characters. And so I usually build my characters out from there. So as a matter of fact, that's what I've been doing the last couple of days on a story. The next story in this series is I've been working on the character profiles for the two characters.
Oh my gosh, you do like an astrological chart. You're
Yeah.
basically like going like trace your birthday and trying to figure out like how they felt. That's like amazing. That's dedication.
Yeah, it is so much fun, and it really, really makes the character feel like a living, breathing person to
Yeah.
me, which allows me to then translate that to the page because that's how I want it to feel to the reader as well.
It does. I feel like your characters speak for themselves. Like you just like it's a full figure.
information about them, and and now that I know your process, I'm like, I'm fascinating. Like, now I'm like guessing, what is it, a Leo? Is it a Gemini? Like, what is the astrological sign for this character?
Listen, you'll be paying attention to that from now on, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty much gonna reread and try to figure out where they were, like what sign would they be. So, so let's talk about your second chance in Cypress Lane. Let's talk about that series. Like, what is the source of inspiration, and what can we expect from the series?
So the Holly Grove Island series is about, is set in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And how I decided to write that series is, I'm originally from Ohio. We moved here to North Carolina about 11 years ago. And we lived here for like a good 5 or 6 years before we finally got a chance to go out to the Outer Banks. And we went out there, we went to a town called Duck. And I'm like sitting there kind of chillaxing on the top floor, looking out at the water and stuff. And that just hit me that I wanted to write a series about a town in the Outer Banks. And that's how I came up with that. How I actually started writing this particular book, Second Chance on Cypress Lane, which, let me back up. Second Chance on Cypress Lane is about an rising star New York reporter who inadvertently gets caught up in an international scandal, loses her career right before she's supposed to get a promotion, and she has to go home, tail between her legs, and kind of plot her next move while she eats lots of lemon meringue pie. And she finds out a bunch of secrets from the past and gets a second chance with her first love. So that's the story for a second chance on Cypress Lane. And the story originally was so there was a publisher a long time ago. I don't even think they exist. But they were going to do like kind of like choose your own adventure romances.
Yeah.
And so I actually came up with this particular story for that. So it was designed to like where the reader could choose at different turns in the story what was going to happen next. So for instance, in the very beginning, we actually saw some of the stuff that happens to the heroine, which we don't see in the book as it is now. And then, so the reader gets to decide, okay, does she stay in New York and tough it out, or does she go back home? So that kind of thing. So that's actually how Second Chance on Cypress Lane got its start.
Oh my gosh. That would be so much fun. I feel like, okay, I think she can go back home.
Yeah. And I still want to do one of those one day.
It sounds like, so here's the thing. I commend authors to take risks and try to do things outside of the comfort zone, but it sounds so complicated for the author.
Yes.
That I feel the pain for it.
Exactly. It was super, super complicated, which is why I said, forget it. I'm just going to make this a regular novel.
Yeah. It's like a book within a book within a book. And you're like, okay. Like,
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So it's a small town, Outer Banks. What is the process like to write a small town for you?
Well, one of the things that my editor on this book was super helpful with is that she just kept reminding me that, the readers with small town really want to feel like they're in the town, that they can, that they know the people and that there's familiar places and that they really feel like they're there. And so she did really help me to keep going back in and adding more to the town in terms to really, really make people, to make readers feel like they're there. So that's some of the comments that have really made me happy to hear people say that they really enjoy the town. Somebody had posted on Twitter a really cute GIF about like somebody packing up their bags and their luggage and stuff. And she said something like, where's Holly Grove Island? Because I'm going there right now. And so that really made me happy. That made me feel like we really nailed the whole concept of the town. And so, for instance, when I was writing this, I have a map. And my drawing is so terrible. I cannot even draw stick figures. So it's a horrible, horrible map that eventually I'll get made into a real map. But I had to have that map there so I would, know where everything was on the island. And, you know, a list of all the different people who own the different shops and things like that. In the stores and stuff. I wanted to be there, and how people or their children who own those shops could possibly be part of a future story. So it was lots of stuff to keep track of. Let me tell you that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's like something unique about this book. It's like it feels like the setting, it's like a third character in the story. Like you get to know the characters, you get to feel like you're just like in this world. And that's what I love about reading small town series, is that you get to know the world, and then you see follow-up books where you just like the world keeps evolving and you keep growing with it. So
yes. And I feel like I've always written sexy small town in terms of it's sexy and it's set in a small town. But I think this book takes the small town part to a new level in terms of getting to know, you know, all the townspeople and you know, all of the little places around town and stuff that will keep showing up throughout the series.
I love this. So what can we expect for book 2?
So book 2 is gonna be Sinclair's story, and Sinclair and Garrett, which Garrett is Dexter's cousin. And Sinclair is Dakota's best friend. So they have a love-hate relationship for real. So it's gonna be enemies to lovers for sure. But also in this book, we're gonna be planning Dakota and Dexter's wedding. So it's gonna be tons of fun.
Yes, it's so fun. So you write casual romance, and that's definitely one of those things that's very well known that are tropey. What is your favorite trope to write?
So, though, if I'd have to say right off the top of my head for sure, to read and to write, Enemies to Lovers is my favorite, which is why I'm so excited about writing this next book, which is called Return to Hummingbird Way, the one with the book 2 of Holly Grove Island series. Love doing Enemies to Lovers. And some of my favorite ones that I've written are Enemies to Lovers, like in the Bourbon Brothers series, Engaging the Enemy, which is book 3 in that series, which was so fun. It was Enemies to Lovers. That one was actually a former friends to Enemies to Lovers. And it's like funny because I had went to a period where I was doing a lot of those, because I have like 3 books that are like former friends to enemies to lovers. And so, but yeah, so that would be my top one that I love to write. But really, I have like a top 5, and that would be like enemies to lovers, friends to lovers. I like best friends, younger sibling, and second chance would be in there. And I love forced proximity too. And as a reader, you know, I don't think I've written a forced proximity, but you never know what's coming up.
That's not bad, you know, or road trips. Like, you're like, ooh, there's nothing to do. We gotta hang out.
And the other reason, like when you said which favorite trope, like that's the thing. I never think in terms of just one trope. I'm always thinking multiple tropes. So, like, you know, usually the books, especially when I do the category ones, are, you know, trope on top of trope, you know. Second chance, enemies to lovers, workplace romance, you know, we're combining them all. So,
yes, and with the secrets and a family dynamic. Yeah, it's like a little trope fast that hits you in the right spot, and you're just like, you add the family, you add the secrets, you add the stuff, and it's like, it's delicious. So
thank you.
So what can we expect from the Bourbon Brothers series? You gave me a sneak peek of who's coming for the next book, but
so the Bourbon Brothers is about a series about siblings, most of whom help run their family's world-renowned distillery in Tennessee. And so it was called the Bourbon Brothers, but there is one sister. And so the next book is the sister's book, Zora. And she's always been the baby sister, kind of smart ass baby sister throughout the entire series. And so in this story, she gets her own book. And it is I never thought I would write this. A Marriage of Convenience. So it's like a Marriage of Convenience, but it's also a Woke Up in Vegas married story, and it's also a Friends to Lovers story, because this is her best friend. They've been best friends since they were in kindergarten. And so all that tropey goodness. And then the other thing that's so funny is that, like I said, I never thought I would write a marriage of convenience in a contemporary romance. So that's a marriage of convenience. And then this book that I just told you that I overwrote, where I wrote it to like 90 and it was supposed to be 50. That's going to be a marriage of convenience as well. That's also a desire book that's going to be coming out later in the year.
Oh my gosh. First of all, marriage of convenience is forced proximity. So you got it. You're getting there. So,
yes.
So, oh my gosh, you're like calling music to my ears, because I'm always looking for marriage of convenience modern day, like, because I read them in historical, like just well known, but modern marriage of convenience is like there's not that many of them, or if they are, I have to look for them. So
I would agree that there probably aren't as many of them, because it's harder to manufacture, a reason for the marriage of convenience in this day and age, in a Western society. So yeah, that makes it a little trickier. And so, but it was so much fun writing both of them. And so I cannot wait for readers to read that.
Oh gosh, I'm so excited. So now let's go to our round of book recommendations. This is an opportunity to share with our audience what they should read next. What is your favorite genre?
So my favorite genre is romance. Well, it is romance now, and that's what I've been reading for many, many years. But the genre that made me start really wanting to write again as an adult was chick lit. At the time, like I was all about the chick lit, reading it. And so that's why I feel like a lot of my romance has kind of a chick lit feel to it, or a kind of women's fiction feel to it, because that's what made me first start writing again was chick lit. So I'm waiting for it to make like a hard comeback in the U.S. So that's probably my ultimate favorite. But romance, I absolutely love romance. And like I said, even when I was reading chick lit, even when I was reading chick lit, it was always, chick lit that had a central romance in the story anyway. So romance is where it's at.
Which are your chick lit authors? Because used to be my go-to bread and butter was chick lit. For most of the aughts, like I think, most of the aughts, OOs to whatever, that I was just reading chick lit. I didn't start reading romance until 2016. So.
And see, I came very late to romance too, because like I said, I was reading when I started reading again for pleasure. I was reading mostly chick lit and women's fiction, and it wasn't until I wrote my first book and I was in a critique group, and like this critique group started off like bigger, and it had whittled down to like just me and these couple of guys, and then they're like, when I finished the story, they really liked it. And they asked me if I was going to submit it to romance publishers. And I'm like, why would I do that? And they're like, you wrote a romance. And I'm like, really? And so that's what made me really realize, okay, you love stories with a central romance and a happy ending, which is romance. and that's what you are always going to write. And so that's when I really started reading it, was around that time. So maybe it was 2010, maybe, or 2011 or something, that I really started to read romance. So I feel like I'm really came late to the genre. So I have a lot of catching up to do. And whenever people talk about like those classic, books and stuff, I'm like, yeah, those are still on my list to be read. So.
Yes, I understand the same way. I've been catching up. I think I started with contemporary, then I went to historical, and I'm just starting with paranormal. I'm like going through series, and I'm a series binger, so it's like that it allows me to do that. But I'm like, there's like so many books out there, and I'm like,
yes,
so many classics. I'm like,
and I constantly buy them. I don't have time to read them, but I must buy like 2 to 3 books a day. It's just ridiculous.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I buy like all those Kindle deals. I'm like, I just buy them, and then I'm like, or there'll be a new deal, and I'm like, oh, let me see. And then it's like, you bought it like 2 years ago. You're like, oh, thank you.
That happens to be like 3 times a week at least.
Yeah. Thank you, Amazon, for shaming me that I have not read this book, but I just bought it years ago. My past self was very, very smart. So what has been a book that you read this past year that you love?
a book that I read that I absolutely love. I can't remember if I read it last year at this time or earlier this year, but it's Lush Money by Angelina M. Lopez.
Yes.
Love this book so freaking hard. And this year Hate Crush came out the follow up to it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It's on my Kindle. But like I said, I love that book so much. And I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator is just phenomenal. So that's such a great story. I've been recommending that everywhere because I love that so hard. She knows that.
Yeah, I love it. It's Modern Marriage of Convenience. It is a tropes-tastic book. I would tell you, Hate Crush has like so many tropes. It's like one trope after the other. It is just so good and so delicious. So yeah, it's steamy. Like,
I love it. I love it. I can't wait to read that one. I cannot wait because I love the sister character in Lush Money, and so I look forward to reading her story in Hate Crush.
and then we get Roman's story. We get the third brother. He's getting his story in next year, 2020.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too because I loved his character. I love what she did with his character in that first book.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a good series. So it's a great recommendation. So tell us where we can find you online.
You can find me online at my website, reeseryan.com. That's Reese with an S, ReeseRyan.com. And from there, you could find me all the other places I am, like my YouTube show, Story Behind the Story, as well as, Twitter and Facebook and my private Facebook group where we like have authors come and visit us. And, there's giveaways and all kind of goodies and stuff like that. So all of that can be found from reeseryan.com.
I love this. Thank you, Reese, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I appreciate it. This is so much fun.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Once you connect with fellow romance readers and make new friends, get weekly book recommendations, attend monthly meetups, then join our Patreon community. You can join at whattoreadnextblog.com/Patreon. Romance lovers, check out Queen Bee Reads Etsy shop for cute and comfortable bookish apparel. The shop also features social justice apparel and fun items from some of your favorite TV shows like The Schitt's Creek and The Office. Use code WhatToRead10 to save. Visit whattoreadnextblog.com/QueenBeeReads. What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Discover new podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.